Wizard101 currently has 9 gear sets at max level to choose from. With so many choices, I thought the world deserved a guide on every gear set at level 160 and what the redeeming qualities are, what you want from each gear set. I will also be ranking them. This has been a much requested video, so without further ado, let's get right into it. So starting at number 9 on this ranking, I would say that the worst gear set right now at max level anyways is the Eternal set. So you might know the Eternal set as like the weird ugly cousin of the Aeon gear, and the Aeon gear is just the main questline gear, right? If you quest through Novus or farm the bosses in Novus, you'll get these, and then you could use the Aeon gear to basically craft Eternal gear. It's a one-on-one transfer, but in my opinion, this is no longer as worth it as it used to be. The big draw of Eternal gear is that it gives a ton of HP and a ton of resist, and it even gives a very important stat that you don't get at max level that often, which is Shadow Rating. However, the trade-off is Pierce, and in my opinion, Pierce is an extremely necessary stat. You should try to avoid giving it up at any point necessary. So because of the fact that it gives up Pierce, it used to be pretty useful on schools that, like, you know, wouldn't have given up as much Pierce as other schools like Ice or Life, because they don't get much Pierce to begin with. But as you'll see later in this video, there are better gear sets now that give Pierce. So basically, you don't need to give up the Pierce ever for the stats you do get from the Eternal. So at this moment, it's not really that worth. Number 8 on this list, as in my opinion, the second to worst, right? It might come as a surprise, but I think it's one of the new raid sets that just got released in the raid. So number 8, the gear set that I'm going to be putting here is a Hunhua set. Now, keep in mind that it's, you know, no one has really gotten the main gear drops. I'm just basing this off of, like, you know, the leaks that I've had and the few drops that I have managed to get from the lower tier bosses. But in my opinion, the most useful part of this set is actually just the Athame. I think this is a great way to give up a little bit of damage compared to that base Aeon set while gaining pip chance. As you can tell by the comparison of Aeon versus Comet Athame, you're giving up 1 damage for ice and 3 damage for death in return for 2 pip chance. If you're low on pip chance, is a great way to not give up stats while also not pip failing. While the main gear is well-rounded and you wouldn't go wrong by running, you know, every piece of it, you could get better stats by not doing that, which is why I think it's actually held back by how well-rounded it is. That being said, the Athames, probably good. I don't believe the rings are as good because they don't give secondary school damage or that much extra pip chance. So I think it's just the Athames that are really worth it. Number 7 on the list is the Void gear from the first Dragonspire raid. Now, this gear is slowly gotten out competed by all the other gear sets you're gonna see, like, you know, further in this video. But I do think there's some very redeeming qualities, right? For example, I think the best piece of gear from the Void set is the 160 hat. And what you might notice is that it doesn't have a shield pin, which a lot of people see as a weakness, but it has a power pin. So if you ever need extra accuracy to fill in a gap with your utility, that power pin can be huge. And overall, the stat that it gives up is critical, which isn't really that bad. Like, you can give up crit and you'll still be fine. For lower accuracy schools, the Void robe also gives even more power pins than what is considered average. So if you want to fill in gaps in terms of your accuracy, especially to like off-school stuff, the Void hat and the Void robe are great places to start. That being said, if you want more shield pins, there's better gear like the Burrower gear, which we'll talk about later in this video. So that's kind of why the Void gear is so low on the list. Definitely not a bad gear set and definitely worth getting if you want, you know, a good option. But it's a little bit more situational than the other gear sets in this video. Number 6 on this list is the Skyfair gear set. Now, I'll be honest, the Skyfair gear set is not that amazing, but it is high up on this list because I believe that every school should have one piece from the set if they want the best stats. It does kind of suck that it's from a pack, but I will say this, I think the deck from the Skyfarer pack is the best deck that you could possibly have. It gives you 4 stats that are all very useful, and the only stat that it gives up compared to other decks is just a health. That's it, a little bit of health. While other, like, you know, decks, they might give health, you know, like, they still give up, like, a stat that you'd always want. For example, when comparing to the Eternals, you know, set, like, the deck doesn't give crit. As far as the other pieces of Skyfarer gear that's actually worth looking into, in my opinion, I do think the hats are decent. And the real shtick with Skyfarer gear, as in like the main gear, is the problem with it is that it just doesn't give block. And when you start giving up block on too many pieces of gear, when someone hits you, their crit multiplier gets very high. And this is a super common mistake that people make. Make sure, y'all, when you're making your gear sets, only give up block on one piece of gear if you can help it. Otherwise, you will have a hard time at max level PvP any sort of max level combat. So while the stats are very well rounded on the Skyfair gear, the reason why the hat is so good is because it gives up the least block. There are robes that give over 100 block, and there are boots that give nearly 200 block, right? So if you're gonna like, sub in a piece of Skyfair gear, you're gonna want to sub in the hat where you lose the least block. In terms of why it's even high up on this list, it's just the deck in my opinion. If you don't have the deck, it's not even a big deal. You just give up a stat and you get some HP for it. It's not really that crazy. We're at the 5th best gear set, and this is where I would really start paying attention because this is how you start getting into the best stats in the game for both PvP and PvE. Aeon gear, as mentioned before, is the default. It's extremely good. It gives you every single stat and honestly gives you pretty offensive potential without giving up anything but shadow pip rating. And since shadow pip rating is like really good in PvP, you'll see less Aeon gear used in PvP, but in PvE, Aeon gear is extremely good. What I also think is super underrated about Aeon gear specifically is that it gives you maximum sword pins, meaning, right? Let's say that on a life, I wanted to get like, storm secondary hitting stats. If I were a casual player and I wanted to like, do some PvE like that, full Aeon gear will get me there very fast without needing shad. Not to mention, in my opinion, I think the Aeon Athame and the Aeon ring are the best things you could possibly rock. The only time you would ever want to sub these pieces out is if you want healing instead of damage for some reason, or I guess if you wanted to like, I don't know, like give up some like damage for pip chance. Even then, I still feel like Aeon gear is super solid when it comes to just the Athame and the ring. Would I run a hat or robe or boots in PvP with the Aeon gear? Not if I had the choice to run other gear, which is why it's not that high up on this list. But overall, for a default set that you can get very naturally, super well rounded, it's all you really need to play the game casually, and that's really nice. The 4th best gear set, in my opinion, in Wizard101 at max level is the Nullity set. Now, the Nullity set is extremely overpowered in some ways and extremely underpowered in other ways, which is what makes it so interesting. For example, the robes, in my opinion, are the best for PvE because they give up block and they literally max out all of your other stats. Your pierce is nuts, your damage is nuts, your crit is nuts, and you get shad rating. In PvP, for the same reason as a Skyfair gear, you don't want to run too many pieces of this because you'll just give up too much block. But I would say if you were to run a piece, I would say the robe is a great place to start. What I really like about this gear set is it actually offers one of the only ways for you to add accuracy to like your main school without really giving up too many stats, like on a pet for an accuracy talent or a triangle jewel for accuracy, right? You just get extra accuracy from the Nullity Blade. This is obviously raid gear from the Dragon Spy raid. This is the other set compared to the Void set. But this, in my opinion, is purely and simply the better set compared to Void. Nullity, Athame, and Rings might also be meta one day if we really need pip chance, because they give more pip chance than Aeon, but also give secondary school damage, unlike other things that give extra pip chance. So if we're ever in a meta that's like pip starved, the Nullity gear could be better for more than just the robe and the wand, and it could also be useful for the ring and the Athame. If you want the best PvE stats, running the Dragon Spy raid for the robe is probably a really good idea, but keep in mind, that's a raid. You need like 11 other people, you need to be in a guild. But I will say this is a vast improvement to Aeon gear if you do have this. It makes the game faster, more convenient, easier. There's a lot of pluses to having these robes, especially on schools like Fire, Storm, Depth, and Myth. The 3rd best gear set, in my opinion, at max level is the Myers set. And while this gear is from the Night Myers Horde pack, it is farmable from a gauntlet, so at least that's one plus of having pack gear so high up on this list. And the reason I think this gear set is so amazing is because it gives extremely high resist amulets with 2 square sockets. The tankier the school, the better the amulet is. In fact, I would say in PvP, this amulet is the best literally for every school except Storm. Storm is the only school that doesn't get enough resist from this amulet for it to be worth it over just a mastery amulet, but this is an incredibly tank-worthy amulet. It gives tons of HP, tons of resist, 2 square sockets, and a brace item card. Additionally, I also feel like the robes are extremely good. The big weakness with these robes, much like Aeon gear, is that they do not give shad, but unlike Aeon gear, you get a lot more defense. Could you run full Mire gear in PvP? No. For the same reasons you wouldn't run full Aeon, you couldn't run full Mire. But if you can find enough different gear set pieces to make your shad chance high, I'd say the robe is a great thing to have just to round out your stats. The 2nd best gear set at max level, in my opinion, is, as you can see, the Burrower gear. Now, at the time that you're watching this gear is causing issues in the community because this is not not something you can farm from a raid or from a gauntlet or anything. You just open up packs and you get lucky and you get this gear. That's it. It's money for gear. And I think it's a real shame that a piece of gear that you can only pay for is, in my opinion, the second best at max level right now. But there's a reason for this. It literally is better than Eternal gear when you compare it, like, you know, pound for pound, because you don't give up any defense and you gain pure. And the one stat that you do give up on this, which is accuracy, is something you can easily gain back using, you know, your triangle sockets, which can give, like, you know, accuracy, or even pets that give accuracy. The less your school needs accuracy, the better this gear is. So, like, you know, if your life, balance, or death, this gear is like, you know, 2 to 3 pieces of this are incredible for you. It also gives you 2 shield pins, which is extremely good for healing schools, and you can put resist pins instead of healing pins if you want more tankability. Up to this point, we've talked about everything but hat and boots, and that's because, in my opinion, the best stats for hat and boots, unless we're talking about the #1 gear set in this video, is Burrower gear. We're talking in PvP and PvE. This is probably just how you get your most well-rounded stats, with the exception of what we're going to talk about right now, which is what I believe is the #1 gear set at max level. It's extremely weird to say this, but the best gear set in Wizard101 right now at max level is gear that nobody has managed to get up to this point. There is, in the new raid, a set of gear called the Shibalba set. Now, this is only based on leaked gear files, meaning no one has gotten this, but the gear looks extremely promising. And there's a couple of reasons to say this. In my opinion, the wand from the raid right now, the Shibalba wand anyways, is the best wand. It's extremely similar to the Burrower gear. However, there's one key difference. You might notice that the Burrower wand, right? It gives damage and pierce for your school, it gives block and crit for your school, and it gives shad chance. However, there's 2 major weaknesses to the Burrower wand. The one big thing is that it doesn't actually give damage to the secondary school. It gives block for some reason, which is whack. And also, what's even worse, in my opinion, is the Shadow Wanteds. Shadow Wanteds just are not good compared to same school Wanteds. In PvP and PvE, you lose damage and utility when you have a Shadow Wanted over, like, a Storm Wanted on a Storm, for example. On my screen, you see what is an example of one piece of a raid wand, basically, and you'll notice something. There's damage and pierce for both a primary and secondary school. There's shad chance, and there's same school wanted. That makes this wand not only just the best wand if you want shads and utility, but also the best wand for dual schooling if you have a secondary school that you want to dip into. The other reason why I think Shibalba gear is slightly better than Burrower gear is because I think that there's a themes and rings that give more pip chance for damage, and because of that, you can make up for the main weakness of the main gear set of Shibalba gear. Burrower gear gives you every stat except accuracy. Shibalba gear gives you accuracy, but it doesn't give you pip chance. In my opinion, there are more schools that actually need the accuracy over the pip chance. I feel like more schools will want, you know, more Shibalba gear than Burrower gear. Additionally, compared to, like, the Burrower hats and the Burrower boots, I believe the Shibalba gear actually gives you a little bit more damage, which means the damage that you give up on the themes and rings to get the pip chance that you lose on the Shibalba gear is already kind of made up for. It's weird to say this without seeing the gear, but I'm fairly confident that, you know, if you have either, it's fine, but I think the Shibalba gear will be slightly better than Burrower gear. I think for most schools, when, you know, everyone eventually gets this gear, the best gear set will be some combination of Mire gear, Burrower gear, and Shibalba gear. I think that's going to be the best sets to go to if you want to get the best stats. But as you guys might have been able to tell from this video, especially if you're casual, there are a lot of sources of gear that you don't have to grind or pay for. Hopefully this video was helpful. I try to do some good research on this, and obviously it is opinionated, so I want to hear y'all's opinions too. You guys agree with my overall rankings of the gear sets, or do you guys think that some of my rankings are whack? Let me know in the comments. As always, drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon. And yeah, y'all.